a tablet of clay, a wedge-shaped script, and a story older than any holy book still read aloud today. Imagine holding in your hands a fragment of a world that existed 4,000 years ago, its words pressed into the clay by an anonymous scribe in a city of mud-brick walls and temple towers. This is not merely an old tale. It is humanity's first recorded epic, a narrative so powerful that echoes of it ripple through myths, scriptures, and movies we know now. Yet most people have only heard the title, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Few know what is actually written there. Fewer still realize how much of the text was hidden, missing, or mistranslated for generations. According to the surviving tablets, the epic comes from the city of Uruk in ancient Mesopotamia, a metropolis of dazzling size for its time, surrounded by a 7-mile defensive wall, lined with bustling markets and stepped temples rising toward the sky. In that world, kings were half divine. Floods could erase entire cities overnight, and the border between legend and daily life was thin. The people of Uruk saw their ruler, Gilgamesh, as part god, part man, a figure both inspiring and terrifying. But the story that has come down to us is not only about a king's strength. It is about friendship, grief, and the search for meaning in a world where death seemed inevitable. Clay tablets unearthed in the 19th and 20th centuries revealed pieces of this long-lost epic. Archaeologists working at Nineveh, Nippur, and other sites discovered cuneiform fragments in different dialects and eras, sometimes thousands of kilometers apart. Scholars spent decades fitting the shards together like an enormous jigsaw puzzle. Even now the text is incomplete. Entire lines remain missing. Yet enough survives to tell a sweeping, deeply human story that begins with a restless king and ends with a meditation on mortality. To understand how radical this work was, we must step into the world that produced it. Around 2100 BCE, southern Mesopotamia was a patchwork of city-states, each with its patron deity, its ziggurat, its scribal schools. Clay and reeds were cheap, papyrus and parchment unknown. So every important word was etched into wet clay with a stylus, then baked or dried. What we call literature began as rows of tiny wedges. Reading them today is like hearing a faint voice across a chasm of time. Unlike later myths, where gods dominate every scene, the Epic of Gilgamesh places a mortal, albeit extraordinary, king at its center. According to tradition, Gilgamesh was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human. This strange proportion appears repeatedly on the tablets, a symbolic way of saying he belonged to both worlds, but fit comfortably in neither. The text paints him as a builder of walls and temples, a judge, a warrior, and at first a tyrant. His subjects cry out to the gods to send relief from his arrogance. The answer comes not as a flood or a plague, but as another man, a wild counterpart created to balance the king's power. That man is Enkidu. Before the two heroes meet, Enkidu lives in the steppe among animals, hairy, free, and untamed. He drinks at the watering holes with gazelles, fills in traps set by hunters, and knows nothing of cities. His arrival in the story marks one of the earliest examples of the noble outsider motif in world literature. Scholars see in Enkidu a reflection of humanity's own shift from a nomadic life to urban civilization, a living mirror held up to Gilgamesh. When they finally clash, the meeting is not a battle to the death, but a wrestling match that ends in mutual respect. This turning point sets the tone for the rest of the epic. Instead of eliminating his rival, Gilgamesh gains a companion who will change his life. Together they will confront monsters, challenge divine order, and ultimately face the mystery of mortality. What makes this opening so compelling is how modern it feels. We recognize in Gilgamesh and Enkidu the archetype of two opposite characters whose collision sparks transformation, a template for countless stories from Achilles and Patroclus to modern buddy movies. Yet in the context of the 3rd millennium BCE, this was revolutionary storytelling. It humanized a king, celebrated friendship, and dared to question whether even the mightiest could escape death. Archaeology adds another layer of fascination. For centuries the epic lay buried, forgotten by the very cultures that had once revered it. The first major fragments came to light in the mid-1800s at the site of Nineveh in present-day Iraq, inside the ruins of the library of King Ashurbanipal. In 1872, a young British museum assistant named George Smith deciphered a tablet describing a great flood and a hero who built a boat, a story strikingly similar to the biblical Noah. News of this Chaldean flood electrified Victorian audiences and sparked a race to find the rest of the epic. But the flood episode is only one part of a much larger narrative. By piecing together older Sumerian poems with later Akkadian versions, scholars gradually reconstructed the standard version we read today. Yet differences among the tablets hint at alternative endings, missing adventures, and subtle themes that are rarely discussed outside academic circles. These stories they never told you reveal a Gilgamesh more complex than the popular image, not just a strong king who sought immortality, but a man who wrestled with the meaning of life, with dreams and omens, with gods who were at once capricious and oddly sympathetic. As we journey through the epic in the coming minutes, you will not hear a dry recital of lines from a museum label. You will step into the city of Uruk at dawn, feel the heat rising from the baked clay streets, listen to the scribes murmuring in temple schools. You will watch as the wild man Enkidu takes his first steps toward civilization. You will witness two friends confront monsters of cedar forests and bulls of heaven, and stand with a grieving king who crosses seas of death, seeking an answer no human has ever found. This is the promise of the Epic of Gilgamesh, to show us ourselves at the dawn of story, our fears, our friendships, our questions about what lasts when we are gone. It is older than Homer, older than the Hebrew Bible, older than the myths of Greece and India. Yet it still speaks, in its wedge-shaped whisper, about power, love, loss, and the strange possibility of wisdom in accepting our limits. In the next movements of this narrative, we will move deeper into the origins of the myth, meet the gods and symbols that shape it, and uncover the little-known variants that rarely make it into school textbooks. But for now, hold that first image, a clay tablet, a king restless in his walled city, and a wild man running free across the plains. Between them lies the oldest story of friendship and the first great meditation on what it means to be human. If you could travel backward in time to the earliest days of the Epic of Gilgamesh, you would not find one single story etched neatly on a tablet. You would hear scattered songs, prayers, and heroic tales sung in temple courtyards, at banquets, and in small village shrines. The earliest surviving pieces of the legend are Sumerian poems dating to around 2100 BCE, centuries before the standard Akkadian version took shape. In these fragments, Gilgamesh appears under his Sumerian name, Gilgamesh, and each poem stands alone like a separate episode. There's Gilgamesh and Nuada, Gilgamesh and the Bull of Heaven, Gilgamesh, Enkidu, and the Netherworld. Only later were these episodes woven into a single epic narrative. This gradual evolution gives the story a layered texture. The Sumerian poems depict a powerful but often impulsive hero who battles monsters, builds temples, and seeks fame. They are closer to folktales than philosophy. But by the time scribes wrote the Akkadian version, probably in the early 2nd millennium BCE, the story had deepened into something more unified and reflective. It became not only an adventure, but a meditation on mortality. Scholars now call this later compilation the Standard Babylonian Version, named after the dialect in which it survives. The shift from Sumerian to Akkadian also shifted the worldview. Akkadian was a Semitic language, related to Hebrew and Arabic, spoken across much of Mesopotamia. When the epic was rewritten in Akkadian, new characters were added, old episodes rearranged, and subtle moral tones introduced. For example, the Sumerian Nuada became Humbaba, a more frightening guardian of the cedar forest. The flood story, which in Sumerian tradition belonged to a separate hero named Usidra, was folded into Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, delivered by the sage Utnapishtim. One of the most revealing tablets, often overlooked, contains a prologue that praises the city of Uruk itself before it mentions Gilgamesh. Look at its wall, it says. Climb upon it, examine the base. This is not just a tourist's invitation. It is a clue to how Mesopotamians defined greatness. To build something lasting, a wall, a temple, a city, was to outweigh time. Gilgamesh's walls still stood in the memory of scribes centuries after his reign, even if his bones had turned to dust. The epic's preservation owes as much to bureaucracy as to art. In the great temples of Mesopotamia, scribal apprentices copied texts repeatedly as exercises. Each new copy extended the life of the story. Some tablets were buried when libraries collapsed. Others were stored and forgotten. Ironically, destruction saved them. When the Assyrian capital Nineveh burned in 612 BCE, the heat baked thousands of clay tablets in Ashurbanipal's library, turning them into durable ceramics that could survive 2 millennia underground. Without that catastrophe, much of the Epic of Gilgamesh might have dissolved back into mud. It is easy to imagine a single author shaping the epic like a modern novelist. In reality, the text was the product of countless hands over centuries. Scribes in Nippur, Sippar, and Uruk wrote slightly different versions. Marginal notes crept in. Some lines were doubled or replaced. The flood narrative in particular shows signs of borrowing from older traditions while anticipating later ones. This fluidity is part of the epic's power. It carries within it not only a hero's journey, but the echo of a civilization transmitting memory across generations. We also need to place Gilgamesh in a real historical frame. In the Sumerian king list, an ancient record mixing myth and genealogy, a ruler named Gilgamesh of Uruk appears as the 5th king after a great flood, reigning for 126 years. Scholars do not take that number literally, but it hints at a kernel of history, perhaps a charismatic king around 2700 BCE, whose deeds grew in the telling until he became semi-divine. Archaeologists have even found inscriptions in Uruk referring to a Gilgamesh as builder of a wall. Yet no tomb or definitive artifact has been identified. This blend of myth and history is not unusual. Egyptian pharaohs, Greek heroes, and medieval saints all underwent similar mythologizing. But in Mesopotamia, the scribes did something unprecedented. They shaped their stories into a long, continuous narrative that could be read centuries later. When we speak of the first great work of literature, we are really speaking of a 1,000-year collaboration between anonymous storytellers, scribes, and scholars. Another little-known feature of the epic's evolution is how it reflects regional diversity. In some versions, Enkidu's origin differs. In others, Gilgamesh's dreams are more detailed, filled with symbols of falling stars and axes. One tablet adds a dramatic scene where Gilgamesh and Enkidu capture a monstrous creature named the Bullman before they ever confront Humbaba. These variants rarely appear in modern summaries, but they offer a richer, stranger world, a living myth still in motion. Imagine being a young apprentice scribe in a temple school, your fingers coated in wet clay, copying these lines by flickering lamplight. You are not just learning a language. You are inheriting a worldview in which human life is short. Gods are powerful, but not always just, and friendship may be the only shield against fate. The Epic of Gilgamesh was not simply entertainment. It was moral instruction, civic pride, spiritual reflection, and perhaps above all, a record of what it meant to be human in the world's first cities. As our story continues, the clay tablets shift from background to action. We will watch as Enkidu emerges from wilderness to confront Gilgamesh, and as their first encounter changes both men. But to appreciate that moment, hold in mind the centuries of oral tradition and scribal labor behind it, a tapestry of voices woven into one enduring epic. Long before the two names became inseparable, they existed at opposite ends of the human experience. Gilgamesh stood at the center of civilization, ruling Uruk with energy and excess. Enkidu belonged to the open steppe, living among antelope and wild cattle, untouched by cities, laws, or even bread and beer. Their convergence is the moment when the Epic of Gilgamesh begins to feel like a living drama rather than a list of heroic deeds. The tablets describe Gilgamesh at the height of his power, but also of his arrogance. He is tireless in war, unmatched in building, relentless in claiming his kingly privileges. His people, exhausted, pray to the sky for relief. The goddess Aruru, called Ninhursag in older texts, responds not with lightning or famine, but with a kind of counterweight. She kneads clay and shapes a wild man, as strong as the essence of Anu, the sky god. Enkidu is born not in a cradle but in the wilderness, covered in hair, his body wet with dew, running with the gazelles, freeing animals from hunters' traps. He embodies the vitality of nature before civilization touched it. A trapper sees him and is frightened. Day after day Enkidu fills his pits, releasing the game. The trapper goes to his father for advice, and together they travel to Uruk to report to Gilgamesh. The king listens and suggests an unusual plan: send a temple courtesan to civilize the wild man. In Mesopotamian thinking, intimacy, food, and ritual were gateways from nature into culture. The courtesan, often named Shamhat in the tablets, goes to the watering hole where Enkidu drinks. She bares her body, offers herself, and when Enkidu accepts, a great transformation begins. For 6 days and 7 nights, the text repeats the rhythm like a drumbeat. He is with her. When he returns to the animals, they shy away. He can no longer run as before, but he has gained something else: the mind of a human, the stirrings of speech, and the curiosity to seek Uruk. This scene has often been sensationalized or moralized in later retellings. In the original context, it is less about seduction than initiation. Shamhat feeds Enkidu bread, pours him beer, anoints him with oil, and clothes him. These are the hallmarks of becoming fully human in Sumerian eyes: eating the city's food, drinking its drink, adopting its rituals. Even his body changes. The tablets say his understanding broadened. Modern readers may hear echoes of the biblical Adam and Eve, but the Mesopotamian story is more ambiguous. It presents civilization as both loss and gain, strength traded for knowledge, speed for speech. Guided by Shamhat, Enkidu journeys to Uruk. On the way he hears the people lamenting their king's heavy hand. For the first time he feels a sense of mission. When he enters the city, the scene is electric. This is a man of the wild, enormous, clothed but still radiating the freedom of the steppe, striding through the avenues of brick and incense. He learns that Gilgamesh plans to assert his privileges again at a wedding ceremony. Enkidu blocks the doorway. The crowd holds its breath. 2 titans are about to meet. Their confrontation is not a quick skirmish, but a full-blown wrestling match. The tablets say the doorposts of the palace shake. The walls tremble. Each man throws the other, testing every ounce of strength. But instead of killing each other, they reach a deadlock. Gilgamesh breaks into a laugh, recognizing an equal at last. Enkidu too smiles. In that moment, rivalry turns to brotherhood. The people of Uruk exhale. The goddess Aruru's plan has worked, at least for now. The text lingers on their new bond. Gilgamesh takes Enkidu by the hand, calling him friend and brother. They bathe, eat, and speak as companions. For a king who has known only dominance, this is a revolution. For a wild man who has known only freedom, it is also a revelation. Out of this unlikely pair will come one of the earliest literary portraits of friendship, not as a background detail, but as the engine of the plot. Little-known variants add color to this episode. One fragment describes Enkidu's first sight of the city's massive walls and temples, marveling at their scale. Another hints that Enkidu has prophetic dreams even before meeting Gilgamesh, as if destiny is guiding him. Some versions place Shamhat and Enkidu in Uruk for several days before the confrontation, allowing a slow build of tension. These differences rarely make it into classroom summaries, but they show how ancient storytellers experimented with pacing. Much like screenwriters today, what matters for the arc of the epic is the change in both men. Gilgamesh is no longer alone at the top of the world. Enkidu is no longer an anonymous force of nature. Together they become heroes in the classic sense, restless, daring, and now united. Almost immediately Gilgamesh proposes an expedition that will test their new alliance, a quest to the great cedar forest to confront its monstrous guardian. It is a journey that will bring them glory, but also set in motion the tragedy at the heart of the epic. Yet before that journey begins, the text gives us a quiet moment. Gilgamesh and Enkidu stand on the ramparts of Uruk, looking out at the horizon. The king speaks of fame. The wild man listens, perhaps already sensing the cost. This pause between meeting and adventure is one of the reasons the epic of Gilgamesh still feels human after 4 millennia. It understands that every great quest begins with a conversation between friends, a shared desire to see what lies beyond the known. With the bond between Gilgamesh and Enkidu sealed, the tablets shift from the intimate streets of Uruk to the vast, imagined edges of the world. The new companions decide on a feat so audacious that even the city elders tremble, to travel north to the cedar forest and slay its guardian. In Mesopotamian geography, the Cedar Mountains lay far beyond daily life, a real Lebanon transformed into a mythic realm. For a people who built with mud, brick, and reeds, the thought of endless stands of fragrant timber was intoxicating. Cedars were sacred, rare, and the source of royal building projects. To cut them without permission was to trespass against the divine. According to the epic, the cedar forest belongs to the god Enlil and is guarded by a monstrous being named Humbaba, or Hiwa, in Sumerian versions. He is described as huge, with a roar like a flood, a mouth of fire, and a face that shifts into terrifying shapes. Some lines call him a demon, others hint at a giant, a wind spirit, or a living embodiment of nature's untamed power. Scholars see in Humbaba an echo of real dangers faced by travelers, wild beasts, bandits, storms, fused into one archetypal opponent. Gilgamesh frames the expedition as a quest for lasting fame. "I will cut the cedar, I will establish my name," he says in paraphrase. But the city elders are uneasy. They warn him of Humbaba's strength, of the risk of offending Enlil. Even Gilgamesh's mother, the wise goddess Ninsun, prays to the sun god Shamash for their protection. Before leaving, Gilgamesh makes offerings and receives weapons, a massive axe and a sword forged for the journey. Enkidu, once a child of the wild, now guides his friend into it. In some tablets he shows Gilgamesh the paths, knows the watering holes, and understands the omens of the steppe. The journey to the cedar forest is more than a march. Each night Gilgamesh has dreams filled with strange symbols, a falling star, a mountain collapsing, a wild bull pinned. Enkidu interprets them as good signs, promising victory. This dream motif runs through the entire epic, giving it an oniric rhythm. It also shows how ancient Mesopotamians treated dreams as messages from the gods, requiring skilled interpretation. When the heroes finally reach the forest, the text slows to describe its marvels. The cedars rise high, their shade is deep, their fragrance sweet. Birds sing, monkeys shriek, and streams run clear. This is no desert wasteland but a living paradise, guarded by a single, terrifying sentinel. Humbaba senses their approach. His shout shakes the trees. In some versions, he tries to frighten them away, promising that Enlil will curse them. In others, he charges immediately. The battle is not just brute force. Gilgamesh prays to Shamash, who sends powerful winds to pin Humbaba. The monster's 7 auras, radiant terrors, are stripped from him one by one. Enkidu urges Gilgamesh not to listen to Humbaba's pleas. This moment is one of the epic's moral pivots. In many modern retellings, the heroes kill a simple villain, but the tablets show a more ambiguous scene. Humbaba, once fearsome, is now pleading for his life, offering to serve Gilgamesh as a vassal. Some lines even portray him as a necessary protector of the forest. Gilgamesh hesitates. Enkidu presses him to strike before the gods intervene. Together they kill Humbaba and cut off his head. They fell the tallest cedar, fashion a great gate for Enlil's temple, and raft the logs downriver to Uruk. In the Akkadian version, they also build a huge raft for their return, floating with the bounty of a forbidden realm. The victory song echoes through the city, but the text lets us feel the unease beneath the triumph. They have violated a sacred domain. Enlil's wrath is coming. This episode is a turning point for both heroes. Gilgamesh achieves the glory he sought, but it sets him on a path toward loss. Enkidu, who once lived in harmony with animals and wild places, now has blood on his hands. In a subtle way, the slaying of Humbaba mirrors his own civilizing earlier in the story, a loss of innocence followed by irreversible change. Less-known fragments add fascinating details. One tablet describes a council of gods debating the hero's fate after the killing. Another mentions that Humbaba's 7-fold radiance is captured like trophies. In yet another, Enkidu dreams of a mountain falling on him, foreshadowing his own death. These scattered lines hint that ancient audiences were meant to see the Cedar Forest episode not as a simple monster hunt, but as a moral dilemma about overreaching power and ecological violation. When the heroes return to Uruk, They bring more than timber. They bring the aura of those who have touched forbidden things. The city greets them with parades and praise. Gilgamesh bathes, dresses in royal robes, and places a crown upon his head. But his eyes are already turning toward the next great challenge, unaware that the gods are preparing a lesson. This mix of triumph and foreboding gives the epic its depth. Even at its most action-packed, the text is not a power fantasy. It is a meditation on the cost of fame, the fragility of friendship, and the unseen lines between human ambition and divine order. By the time the reader or listener reaches this point, they sense that the story's heart lies not in the cedar logs, but in what happens to the two companions after their victory. The triumphant return from the cedar forest places Gilgamesh and Enkidu at the peak of their fame. The people of Uruk cheer them as heroes, carrying cedar beams and the head of Humbaba as proof of their daring. They have brought back timber, prestige, and stories to tell for generations. Yet in the rhythm of the epic, every ascent hides the beginning of a descent. It is here, at the moment of greatest glory, that the forces above decide the balance has tipped too far. One of those forces is Ishtar, goddess of love, war, and the planet Venus. In Mesopotamian belief, she is dazzling and dangerous, capable of blessing and destroying with equal ease. When Gilgamesh returns from his victory, clad in splendor, Ishtar looks upon him with desire. She offers him her hand, promising treasures, kingship beyond kingship, and divine favor. The lines echo with seduction but also with the weight of precedent. All her previous lovers, she warns or others warn, came to ruin. Gilgamesh does something shocking for a hero in a Bronze Age epic. He refuses a goddess. He lists the fates of her past consorts: shepherds turned into wolves, gardeners struck down, stallions crippled. His answer is a mix of prudence and arrogance. It insults Ishtar publicly, and she erupts in fury. In the Akkadian version, she storms up to heaven, to the throne of her father Anu, demanding vengeance. The text captures a rare image of divine family politics, with Anu hesitating, reminding his daughter of earthly consequences, while she rages that Gilgamesh must be punished. Anu finally gives her what she demands: the bull of heaven. This is no ordinary animal, but a cosmic force unleashed upon the earth. The ground cracks open as it descends. Rivers dry. Hundreds of men fall into the fissures it creates. The bull's breath scorches the land. In a sense, the tablets portray a natural disaster: drought, earthquake, and plague, personified as a divine beast. Gilgamesh and Enkidu face it together. Enkidu seizes its horns. Gilgamesh strikes with his sword. Working as one, they kill the bull and offer its heart to Shamash, the sun god who has favored them. The crowd rejoices. But the killing of a creature sent directly by the gods is a step beyond anything they have done before. It is not just a heroic feat. It is an act of cosmic defiance. The epic lingers on a grimly humorous detail. Enkidu rips off the bull's thigh and throws it at Ishtar, who is standing on the walls of Uruk watching. She calls together her temple women to mourn the beast. This taunt, more than the slaughter itself, seals their fate. In ancient Mesopotamian etiquette, mocking a goddess was dangerous beyond measure. That night Enkidu dreams of the gods convening in council. Anu, Enlil, Shamash, and others debate what to do. Someone must pay for the hero's arrogance. Shamash argues for mercy, but is outvoted. Enkidu is chosen to die. The text does not explain why the wild man is singled out. Some scholars think it is because he urged Gilgamesh to kill Humbaba and mocked Ishtar. Others see it as the price of his transformation, nature sacrificed for civilization's overreach. Either way, the decision falls like a shadow across the narrative. The next morning Enkidu wakes sick. He curses the trapper who first reported him, the courtesan who led him to Uruk. Then, softening, he blesses her for bringing him friendship and glory. This oscillation between rage and gratitude makes Enkidu one of the most complex figures in early literature. He is not a cardboard hero, but a man confronting his own mortality for the first time. For Gilgamesh, the news is unbearable. He has conquered forests and celestial beasts, but cannot protect his friend from an invisible sentence. The tablets describe Enkidu wasting away over 12 days, telling prophetic dreams of the underworld. In one he sees a house of dust where kings and priests wear feathers and eat clay, guarded by a queen named Ereshkigal. This vision is the oldest surviving description of the Mesopotamian afterlife, not a paradise or a hell, but a gray echo where all go regardless of status. Modern summaries often rush past this section to reach Gilgamesh's quest for immortality, but the ancient text gives it weight. It is the hinge of the entire epic. Friendship, glory, and defiance of the gods have brought the heroes here. Now death asserts itself. Enkidu's decline is narrated with restraint but also with piercing humanity. He who once ran with gazelles and fought monsters can barely rise from his bed. He dreams of his own funeral, and of Gilgamesh wandering the steppe in grief. The Bull of Heaven episode thus marks more than a second victory. It is the moment when victory turns to loss, when the gods draw a line that even the strongest cannot cross. Without it, Gilgamesh would remain a swaggering demigod. With it, he becomes a man whose eyes are open to mortality. This is the pivot from adventure to existential quest, from external battles to an inner search for meaning. Lesser-known fragments add subtle shades. One mentions that the people of Uruk begin to whisper that the gods are angry. Another suggests that Shamhat visits Enkidu during his illness, hinting at a quiet reconciliation. Yet another has Enkidu dreaming not only of the underworld, but of a dark river separating worlds, an image that will return when Gilgamesh later crosses the waters of death. These details, scattered across tablets and translations, give depth to the tragedy, making it feel less like myth and more like memory. As Enkidu's life ebbs, Gilgamesh stands on the threshold of his greatest transformation. Soon he will leave Uruk, not in triumph but in despair, embarking on a journey to find the one man who has escaped death. But for now, the scene is still. A king at his friend's bedside, a city holding its breath, and the knowledge that the gods have spoken. Enkidu's final days unfold slowly on the tablets, like a dimming torch. The wild man who once outran gazelles now lies weak, fevered, and restless. Dreams come to him night after night. He sees a great birdman dragging him down to a shadowy house where kings, priests, and commoners sit alike in dust, clothed in feathers, drinking nothing but clay. He sees his own hands bound. He feels the cold of a gate swinging shut. This is no poetic flourish. It is the oldest written vision of the Mesopotamian afterlife, a place without reward or punishment, only sameness and silence. As Enkidu describes these visions to Gilgamesh, the tone of the epic changes. Until now the story has been about conquest and daring. Here it becomes a meditation on loss. The hero who defeated Humbaba and the Bull of Heaven cannot lift a hand against this enemy. He can only listen, comfort, and grieve in advance. When Enkidu finally dies, the text lingers on Gilgamesh's reaction. He touches his friend's heart, but it does not beat. He covers his face like a bridegroom's veil. He circles the bed, like a lion robbed of its cubs. He tears his hair, rips off his finery, and throws himself on the ground. For 7 days and nights Gilgamesh stays beside the body, refusing burial, hoping for some sign of life. Perhaps the gods will relent, he thinks. But the body begins to decay, and only then does he allow it to be interred with honors. He orders statues, offerings, and ceremonies. The people of Uruk mourn with him. In this ancient text, friendship is not a subplot, but the emotional core. The death of Enkidu breaks open the heart of the king and reveals the theme that will carry the rest of the epic. No one, not even a hero, escapes death. This moment is also where Gilgamesh's character becomes fully human. Until now he has been a restless demigod chasing glory. Now he is a man looking at his own mortality. The tablets say he roams the wilderness in animal skins, his hair unkempt, eating whatever he can find. He cannot bear the city, the walls, the celebrations. He is haunted by a single question. Must I too die like Enkidu? Is there no escape? Scholars note how the imagery in this section mirrors Enkidu's first appearance. The roles are reversed. The king becomes the wanderer, the one outside civilization. This inversion is deliberate. It shows that loss does not simply wound Gilgamesh, it transforms him. He steps into the very space Enkidu once inhabited, searching for answers in the wilderness rather than in temples or palaces. In his wandering he recalls a name, Utnapishtim, a man who survived the Great Flood and was granted eternal life by the gods. Perhaps, Gilgamesh thinks, this figure holds the secret he needs. It is a slender hope, but hope nonetheless. He sets out on a journey no king of Uruk has ever taken, across deserts, mountains, and waters of death, to find the one human being who has escaped the common fate. Little-known fragments show how carefully the scribes built this transition. One tablet adds that Gilgamesh wanders for a month before even forming his plan. Another has him speaking to statues of the gods, demanding answers. These small touches make his grief feel less like a plot device and more like a lived experience. We are not watching a mythic superhero. We are watching a man unravel and rebuild himself. The burial of Enkidu is also full of symbolism. In Mesopotamian culture, proper rites were crucial to ensure the dead could enter the underworld. Without them, a ghost might wander and torment the living. Gilgamesh, despite his anguish, makes sure Enkidu receives every honor. A rich funerary bed, offerings of food and drink, libations poured into the earth. This detail shows a society obsessed with continuity. Even a king's grief must conform to ritual. It also underscores the permanence of death. All rites can do is ease the passage, not reverse it. Modern readers often recognize themselves in Gilgamesh here. We too build, plan, and strive, but death interrupts, rendering achievements fragile. The epic does not offer a simple answer. Instead, it shows a process: denial, rage, despair, and eventually, a search for meaning. This emotional arc, unprecedented in surviving literature, is one reason the Epic of Gilgamesh still feels alive after 4,000 years. By the end of this section, the king of Uruk is a different man. He has left his crown behind, dressed himself in skins, and walked out of the gates alone. The road ahead will take him beyond human lands, to twin mountains at the edge of the world where the sun rises, to scorpion men, immortal gardens, and a ferryman who crosses the waters of death. But all of that still lies ahead. For now the image is stark. A hero stripped of all but grief, walking into the wilderness with a single question echoing in his mind: how can a human being escape death? The death of Enkidu drives Gilgamesh into a journey unlike any he has faced before. No longer seeking Sídhe or glory, he now chases something more elusive: the secret of eternal life. Wrapped in animal skins, gaunt and restless, he wanders through mountains and deserts until he reaches the edge of the known world, the place where the sun itself rises and sets. The tablets describe him arriving at twin peaks called Mashu, guarded by beings half human, half scorpion. Their gaze is so fierce it withers flesh, their bodies massive, their duty to guard the path of the sun. They look upon Gilgamesh and recognize both divine essence and human mortality. When he pleads to pass, they warn that no mortal has ever crossed these gates. Yet his grief and determination move them. They allow him to enter the tunnel through the mountain, the road the sun travels each night. This tunnel is a liminal space, 12 leagues of perfect darkness, so black that Gilgamesh cannot see ahead or behind. He stumbles forward until at last, after endless hours, light bursts upon him. He emerges into a garden of marvels, trees hung not with fruit but with jewels, carnelian grapes, lapis lazuli leaves, agate apples. It is a vision of abundance and permanence, nature transformed into eternal stone. But this is not his destination. He seeks a man, not a treasure. There he meets Sídhe, a tavern-keeper goddess who dwells by the sea. She sees his ragged state and asks why he looks so worn. Gilgamesh pours out his grief and his fear of death. Sídhe responds with words that sound astonishingly modern. She tells him, "When the gods created man, they kept life in their own hands. As for you, Gilgamesh, fill your belly with good things. Day and night, dance and be merry. Cherish the child who holds your hand. Delight in the wife who embraces you. These are the lot of mankind." In other words, accept mortality and live fully. This moment is often overlooked, but it is one of the most profound in the epic. Long before Greek philosophy or biblical wisdom literature, the Mesopotamian tablets already voiced the Carpe Diem theme. Sídhe urges Gilgamesh to stop striving for the impossible and embrace the present. Yet he refuses. His fear is too deep. He demands directions to Utnapishtim, the immortal survivor of the flood. Sídhe sends him to Urshanabi, the boatman who ferries travelers across the waters of death. But before he can board, Gilgamesh in his desperation smashes the stone things, strange objects described in the tablets whose purpose is still debated. Some think they were sacred charms or anchors, others magical beings. Without them, Urshanabi rebukes Gilgamesh for destroying what he does not understand. Still, he agrees to take him if he can cut massive poles of wood to propel the boat. Gilgamesh does so, cutting hundreds, showing his relentless determination. Together, they cross the sea that encircles the world. Each time the boat moves forward, Gilgamesh uses one pole and throws it away, so the waters will not touch him directly. When the last pole is gone, he strips off his garment to use as a sail. At last they reach the distant shore, where Utnapishtim dwells. This section of the epic, rich with symbolism, reads like a passage through the subconscious. Scorpion man at the gates of dawn, a tunnel of darkness, a jeweled garden, a tavern keeper dispensing wisdom, a ferryman across death's waters. Each encounter is an allegory. They show the stages of a human being wrestling with mortality. Terror, temptation, counsel, reckless action, and the final arrival at the figure who embodies survival. Lesser-known variants add texture here. One fragment suggests Sídhe at first bars her door in fear, showing that even divine beings are wary of desperate mortals. Another expands on Urshanabi's rebuke, saying that Gilgamesh must carry the weight of his own mistake. These lines emphasize that the journey is as much about learning limits as about endurance. By the time Gilgamesh steps onto Utnapishtim's shore, he has passed through landscapes of myth that still resonate today. We can see echoes of them in later traditions. Hercules' labors, Odysseus' wanderings, Dante's descent. But what matters in the tablets is not the scenery. It is the transformation of the king. He began as a ruler intoxicated with power. He became a friend. He lost that friend and became a wanderer. Now he stands at the end of the world, demanding answers from the only man who has seen death and returned. The stage is set for one of the most haunting conversations in ancient literature, the meeting of a desperate king and a survivor who carries a secret older than memory itself. On a shore beyond the edge of maps stands a man who should not exist. Utnapishtim, whose name means he found life, is the lone mortal granted immortality by the gods. To Gilgamesh he looks ordinary, even weathered. There's no crown, no shining aura, just an old man sitting with his wife, like any other couple. This anticlimax is deliberate. The epic suggests that eternity does not look like a hero's triumph. It looks like two people living quietly at the end of the world. Gilgamesh pours out his story. The killing of Humbaba, the bull of heaven, Enkidu's death, his own terror of mortality, his journey across darkness and sea. He demands to know how Utnapishtim escaped death. The survivor listens and then answers not with a formula, but with a story older than Gilgamesh himself. He tells of a time when the gods decided to send a great flood to wipe out humankind. The reasons vary in different tablets: overpopulation, noise, divine caprice. Ea, the trickster god of wisdom, whispered the secret to Utnapishtim through a reed wall, warning him to build a massive boat. He was to abandon his possessions, gather his family, craftsmen, and the seed of all living creatures. He built the ship to exact dimensions, sealed it with pitch, and loaded it with food, animals, and artisans. The flood came. Storms raged for days, the waters rising above the highest mountains. When at last it ceased, the boat rested on a peak. Utnapishtim released a dove, then a swallow, then a raven. The raven did not return. He opened the hatch. He offered sacrifice. The gods, smelling the sweet aroma, gathered like flies and regretted their destruction. Enlil, the storm god, arrived in fury at the survival, but was placated. As a unique concession, the gods granted Utnapishtim and his wife eternal life and placed them at the mouth of the rivers, far from humankind. Hearing this, Gilgamesh realizes there was no heroic deed, no riddle, no herb that granted immortality. It was a one-time decision of the gods. The life you seek you will never find, Utnapishtim tells him gently. When the gods created mankind, they kept eternal life for themselves. This is the heart of the epic's philosophy. Immortality is not a prize to be seized. It is a gift withheld. Yet Gilgamesh cannot accept this answer. He insists there must be a test, a way. Utnapishtim proposes a simple challenge. Stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights. If you can do that, perhaps you can resist death. Gilgamesh sits, determined. Within moments he falls asleep. Utnapishtim's wife bakes a loaf of bread each day and places it beside the sleeping king to mark the passage of time. By the 7th day, the stack of loaves shows the failure. When Gilgamesh wakes, he denies having slept, but the bread stands as silent witness. Still, Utnapishtim takes pity. He tells Urshanabi, the ferryman, to wash Gilgamesh, clothe him, and send him home. But before they depart, Utnapishtim whispers of one last thing, not immortality, but renewal. On the floor of the deep lies a plant with thorns that pricks like a rose, but can restore youth to the old. If Gilgamesh retrieves it, he may at least regain some vitality. This moment, often overshadowed by the flood story, is crucial. It offers a different kind of hope, not eternal life, but the cyclical chance to begin again. Gilgamesh ties stones to his feet, sinks into the water, and plucks the plant. Joy floods him. He will bring it back to Uruk, share it with the elders, and use it himself when age comes. But on the journey home, he stops to bathe. A snake, drawn by the scent, steals the plant and sheds its skin as it slithers away. The symbol is unmistakable. Renewal belongs to nature, not to man. Gilgamesh sits and weeps. His last chance at escaping age is gone. Yet in that loss, something shifts. The tablets hint at a quiet acceptance. He no longer rages at the gods. He turns his face back toward his city. Lesser-known fragments show Utnapishtim's wife pressing him to give Gilgamesh something, anything, because she pities him. They also show Urshanabi, once rebuked, now becoming a guide home. These small human touches keep the epic from becoming abstract philosophy. They show compassion at the edge of the world. By the time Gilgamesh boards the boat to return, he has passed through every stage of the human confrontation with death: denial, defiance, bargaining, despair, and now acceptance. He carries no magical herb, no secret spell. He carries only the memory of his journey and the wisdom it has carved into him. When the walls of Uruk come into view once more, the king is no longer the man who left. He stands before the city he built, seeing it with new eyes. The next and final movement of the epic will not be another adventure, but a return, the classic closing arc where the hero brings back not a trophy, but insight. The epic closes not with another battle, but with a homecoming. After storms, monsters, gods, and losses, Gilgamesh steps once more onto the soil of Uruk. The city he left in pride now rises before him as a living testament to human work. The walls he once boasted about are still there, solid and sun-baked. The temples still ring with prayers. Life has gone on. Enkidu is gone, the plant of renewal lost, but the city endures, a reminder of what truly lasts. The tablets slow down here, almost like a camera pulling back. Gilgamesh is described showing the ferryman Urshanabi the foundations of Uruk, its ramparts, its bricks baked by ancient masons, the temple of Anu and Ishtar, the city's breadth and splendor. This is the same invitation that opened the epic. Climb the wall of Uruk, walk upon it, examine its foundation. By repeating it at the end, the scribes form a circle. The hero's journey outward has led to an inward realization. You cannot conquer death, but you can build, create, and protect things that outlive you. This ending often surprises modern readers, who expect a climactic miracle. Instead, the tablets offer something subtler. The king returns with no magical secret, only a shift of vision. He still reigns, still judges, still builds, but with a new awareness of his own limits. In Mesopotamian terms, this is wisdom, not the evasion of death, but the acceptance of humanity's place in the cosmos. Lesser-known fragments highlight this change. In one, Gilgamesh dedicates offerings to Enkidu's spirit at the city gates. In another, he instructs scribes to record his story on stone for future generations. These touches hint that the very epic we are reading is the result of his new perspective. Instead of chasing immortality in his own body, he seeks it in words, deeds, and memory. The symbolism of the walls runs deep. For a Sumerian audience, walls were not only defense but community itself, the line between chaos and order. Gilgamesh began the story as the wall's builder and the people's oppressor. He ends it as the wall's guardian and the people's teacher. What seemed like mere architecture becomes a metaphor for continuity. We cannot live forever, but we can build something that holds others together after us. Modern scholars have noted how this conclusion anticipates themes in later literature. Homer's Achilles wins glory but dies young. The biblical Ecclesiastes tells us there's a time for every purpose under heaven. Later philosophers will echo Siduri's counsel, eat, drink, love, for tomorrow we die. Yet all of this is already present quietly in the cuneiform wedges of Gilgamesh's final speech. Even the snake that stole the plant leaves a trace here. As it sheds its skin and disappears, it becomes an emblem of nature's renewal, a cycle denied to humans, but visible all around them. Gilgamesh, standing on Uruk's ramparts, can now see that cycle without rage. His immortality, if any, lies in the city, the story, and the enduring image of two friends who dared together. The tone of the tablets at this point is no longer heroic, but contemplative. There are no more monsters to fight, no gods to defy. Only a king at his city's wall, pointing to its stones, aware at last of what his life has meant. This is why the Epic of Gilgamesh does not end with a death scene or a coronation. It ends with a view, a shift in perspective offered to every listener across the millennia. And so the first great story in human history becomes not only an adventure but a mirror. It shows us our ambition, our losses, and our search for meaning. It reminds us that while we cannot escape mortality, we can shape the world, cherish friendship, tell stories, and leave foundations for others to build upon. In that sense, Gilgamesh's journey never really stopped at the gates of Uruk. It continues wherever someone picks up a fragment of clay, reads the wedge-shaped marks, and hears, across 4,000 years, a human voice asking the same questions we still ask today. More than 4,000 years separate us from the scribes who pressed these words into clay, yet the voice of Gilgamesh feels close enough to touch. We may not build ziggurats or carve laws on steels, but the questions he asked still drive us. What makes a life meaningful? Can friendship soften the edge of fate? How do we face the certainty of death without despair? The Epic of Gilgamesh endures because it is not about a distant king. It is about us, our hopes, our grief, our defiance, and our need to understand. The tablets do not offer a single answer. Instead, they show a journey. Power without restraint. Friendship as a turning point. Loss as a teacher. A long road through darkness. And a return home with new eyes. This arc has become the backbone of countless stories since. Heroes who descend into the unknown and emerge changed, from Homer's Odysseus to Tolkien's Hobbits, are following a path first etched into clay in Uruk. Yet the Epic of Gilgamesh is also unique. It does not end with victory or transcendence. It ends with acceptance and continuity. Its closing image is not a shining hero, but a man pointing to the walls his people built together. In a culture that believed only the gods lived forever, this was a radical message. You may not conquer death, but you can create something that shelters others after you. You can leave a story, a city, a gesture of care. This is why the epic belongs not just in museum cases, but in living conversation. Archaeologists still unearth fragments, adding missing lines, revising translations. Every new tablet is like a breath from the past, reminding us that our oldest literature was collaborative, evolving, unfinished, much like human life itself. The stories they never told you are not hidden secrets so much as pieces still waiting to be rejoined. For modern audiences, the lessons echo across time. When Sídhe tells Gilgamesh to eat, drink, dance, and cherish the child's hand, she anticipates today's mindfulness and gratitude movements. When Enkidu dies and Gilgamesh roams the wilderness, we recognize our own journeys through grief and midlife crisis. When the snake steals the plant, we see how nature renews itself even as we age. And when Gilgamesh stands upon Uruk's walls, we see the possibility of legacy without illusion, of building, teaching, and loving even knowing the end will come. If there's a hidden gift in the epic, It is this shift from immortality to presence. Gilgamesh begins by seeking to make his name eternal. He ends by realizing that what lasts is not a single person, but the bonds and structures we create. This is a more demanding wisdom than a magic herb. It requires courage every day. It invites us to be, in our own time, builders of walls, planters of trees, tellers of stories, friends who stand beside one another against the unknown. The Epic of Gilgamesh still speaks, because it is not only the first epic, it is the first great meditation on what it means to be human. It does not glorify death, but neither does it deny it. It gives us a hero who learns, at terrible cost, to see beyond himself. And in that learning we glimpse a blueprint for our own lives. So imagine again the clay tablet in your hands. Wedge-shaped marks, faint but readable, pressed by someone who lived and died millennia ago. Through that fragile medium a king still walks, a wild man still runs, a snake still sheds its skin, and a city still rises on the plain. The story they never told you is not a lost adventure. It is the quiet, enduring truth at the heart of all stories. We are mortal, yet we can make meaning. We pass on, yet our words, our care, and our creations can outlast us. And that is enough.